Okay, I'm going to be all over the place on this one, so I apologize if this all seems a bit disjointed. But there's a pervasive trend among the major entertainment industries, and it's become too blatantly obvious to ignore. This all stems from the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that have infected every fiber of our economic and sociological identities. We are no longer a unified nation with a common culture. Instead, we have been fractured and subdivided into subcategories based on race, sex, gender identity, political ideology, ESG score, victimhood status, etc., etc. The ramifications of this have been disastrous. Diversity and equity have replaced talent and hard work by rewarding diversity over merit. Inclusivity now promotes the exclusion of the majority of people. Look no further than the situation in any of the latest TV shows or major blockbuster films coming out of Hollywood. Most notable of all these woke failures is Amazon's Rings of Power. This show is garbage, and it's not even up for discussion. Remove Tolkien and Middle-earth from the story, and it's still a horribly written, overpriced, mind-numbingly boring fantasy show. Without attaching the name Tolkien to it, this show never would have seen the light of day. But when initial trailers and superfan interviews showed just how far the showrunners were deviating from the source material, Amazon responded to the criticism by launching a full-scale media assault against the fans, labeling them as toxic, racist, and most recently, patently evil. Never mind the fact that the two showrunners, J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, are both perennial failures that spent 10 years unsuccessfully attempting to get a script from paper to film, but they only landed the job at Amazon on the good name of their former employer, Bad Robot CEO J.J. Abrams. You might remember him as the man that helped Disney destroy Star Wars. Next up, and almost as noteworthy, has been the most recent addition to the MCU, the Disney Plus show She-Hulk. Now, this show is just bad. Not Rings of Power bad. Not even the worst Marvel show or movie. But every episode is one worn-out feminist cliche on top of another. It's not funny enough to be a comedy, and certainly too dull to be a superhero show. There are full episodes devoted to showing She-Hulk dating some of the world's most undateable men, and then hooking up with a guy she just met, fighting with an awful villain at a former friend's wedding after previously suing said villain for the use of the moniker She-Hulk. It just goes on and on. If you like the show, more power to you, I guess. But when facing fan backlash, the media responded by blanketing the critics with clickbaity words like toxic, sexist, incels. You get the idea. Why would they attack their viewers, you ask? Well, it's not because fans hate the character. Far from it. Ask most Marvel Comics fans, and none of them have anything negative to say about Jennifer Walters or her alter ego, She-Hulk. Her origin story was solid, and her abilities weren't in question. It would seem that fans of the comic book character should be singing the praises of this latest Disney Marvel streaming show. Only problem is, the people writing and directing the show didn't make it for the existing fan base, they wrote it for themselves. Self-inserts seldom lead to positive reviews. Now we gotta talk about Bros. You may or may not have heard of this raunchy romantic comedy featuring a cast of exclusively LGBT performers. Spoiler, the movie has orgies. Unfortunately, it seems that according to Billy Eichner, one of the stars and producers of Bros, if you didn't come out and see his film in the theater, it's because you're homophobic. Never mind the fact that the film made less than $5 million its opening weekend, which can only mean one thing. That an incredibly small percentage of the LGBT community itself actually showed up to support it. I mean, the movie could be good. Not likely, but who knows. That doesn't mean I have to go see it. There are hundreds of thousands of films I have never seen featuring straight actors and actresses. Does it make me heterophobic that I don't rush out to see every movie featuring a straight white couple? Maybe. I'll unpack that later on my own time. Speaking of phobias and isms, Viola Davis, a well-established African-American actress, thought that it was very important that people show up for her historically inaccurate film, The Woman King, because according to her, if I didn't go see this film, I am, quote, supporting the narrative that black women can't lead the box office globally. I'm not entirely sure where the narrative started that Hollywood films are something that us plebs are required to show up and support, but that sure is the way this sounds to me. Kinda like Bros. Never mind the fact that The Woman King completely alters the historic events and importance of this entirely female soldier regiment. Spoiler, They're not as good in real life, or at least they weren't as they are in the movie. But they unsuccessfully tried to separate the female soldiers from the rampant culture of slave trading that the Dahomey people were well known for. It's a swing and a miss. Here's a few more examples. Disney continues to churn out their soulless, unoriginal live-action remakes of classic Disney cartoons, no matter how badly they crash and burn, i.e., Pinocchio. But in the case of The Little Mermaid, they are deliberately choosing to race swap Ariel and then have immediately launched into gaslighting the fans by labeling all dissenters as racists. Suddenly, it no longer mattered that the original character had pale white skin with large blue eyes. Now it's simply, well, mermaids aren't real, so what does it matter what color her skin is? They tried this tactic with the female dwarf Disa in The Rings of Power, and it failed miserably. Yes, it's a little odd to see a black dwarf in Lord of the Rings. But as vocalized by a large percentage of viewers, she might be the only likable character on the show. If this was all about racism, that wouldn't be the case, which proves that this is more about respecting the lore and not the implicit racism of the fans itself. How about the woke reimagining of Scooby-Doo? I mean, this is just a horrible idea. To be fair, I have no use for the original cartoon. The live-action remakes, none of it. I don't understand how anyone has ever enjoyed Scooby-Doo, and I probably never will. And that's fine. You do you. I don't need to love it to recognize the significance it has had for millions of people. But here now we have Mindy Kaling saying she doesn't care if people freak out over this race and orientation-swapped Velma. And I say orientation-swapped because there's rumors she's a lesbian, although I'm pretty sure it hasn't been confirmed yet. In the same article where she talks about identifying so much with Velma because of her unconventional looks and personality, she then boldly proclaims that she doesn't care if her zombified version of this classic show bothers anyone. Oh, and Shaggy's now black, so there's that. We're seeing this more and more with places like CNN and Warner Brothers saying that they're trying to get away from politically biased reporting and stories that venture too far into wokeness. Look no further than the epic failure that was Superman's gay, bisexual, pansexual, demisexual, kryptonsexual son. The first book in this comic series saw moderate success, followed by steady decline. Now it's been announced that the series is being cancelled. Perhaps pandering to a small fraction of the population while simultaneously subverting existing characters and established storylines is not the way to make a profit. The thing that most of these fantasy stories have in common is that yes, they're fiction. So when Amazon bastardizes Galadriel or Elrond, when She-Hulk twerks and makes Daredevil her bitch, when straight or white characters are suddenly gay or a different race, the NPC response will always be to devalue the IP that they've done irreparable damage to. This is what narcissists do. They use, they gaslight, then when they can't use anymore, they devalue. Stop letting them. Keep speaking out, protect your stories. Don't let them convince you that our collective culture isn't worth protecting. Because that's what Superman, Frodo, Ariel, and even Scooby-Doo really have in common. They are our culture, and every single superhero story, childhood cartoon, and fantasy novel help to create a culture worth preserving. Thanks for watching, have a nice night.